Great. Hello, everybody. Would like to call this meeting of the HHR Building Committee to order at 6:02 p.m. on December 21st, 2022. First order of business is to approve the minutes from our last building committee meeting, which was on November the 30th. If there's no reason to discuss those minutes, can I get a motion to approve? Dave Martin moves, Jameson seconds. All in favor, say aye. Approved. Great. In terms of public comment, what we can do is if folks have any items that they want to talk about that don't relate directly to the design development drawings that the KG&D team and Ty and Bond are going to go through in a little bit, we can do that now at the request of one of the home's neighbors. We moved public comment on the design development drawings until after the presentation and before the committee considers taking action on approving the next step in the design development. So if anybody has any public comment, we can cover that. We can cover that now, unless it relates to the design development specifically, in which case I would ask that people defer that. Okay, I don't hear any. Quick chairman's report. We have a lot of ground to cover this evening, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. There was an architectural review board meeting last week that KG&D presented at. I unfortunately could not attend because I had just gotten diagnosed with COVID, and Jill couldn't attend because she was at a Board of Education meeting. So the KG&D team presented. They got some feedback from the ARB. We're considering the comments from the ARB. Frankly, it's going to be kind of a balancing act. There's what folks might want in an ideal world versus what the schools need in terms of fulfilling their educational mission and staying within the ed specs. And then obviously, of course, balancing that with our budget constraints. So you'll see some of that in the design development presentation, but that discussions with what ARB has requested are kind of frankly, an ongoing matter. Once we have specific proposals, we can bring those to the committee. I had forwarded to the committee before the meeting the correspondence between the state Office of School Construction Grant and Review and the governor's office, letting them know, setting forth the list of the priority school projects that are going to be on the state legislative calendar. And happy to report that our 3 school projects are on the list. So a thank you to everybody who worked so hard with the state. Dr. Adley was really the spearhead of that on the Darien side, but Dave Cravenzola and his team and Travis Schnell and the KG&D team did an awesome job working with the state. As of now, at least, what the state is telling us is that they are targeting 20.71% reimbursement rate for each of our 3 schools, which I kind of like the 95% rate that Hartford's getting, but it doesn't look like we're going to get that for our alterations. But 20.7 is at the high end. That's I believe, Dave, that's the max we would be entitled to anyway, right?
Right.
So that's
starting. Yep.
Yeah, so that's good news. Obviously, there's going to be ongoing review by the state. They're going to see our design development drawings, and I'm sure come back with comment. But the good news is it's official. were on the legislative list. I was going to turn it over to Jameson. He attended construction phasing meetings for Hinley and Royal on the 14th of December and can report on that. I believe a meeting still needs to be scheduled with respect to homes.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think we actually scheduled the meeting. Thought I saw an email go out for Holmes, which is I thought tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow at 1 p.m.
Okay,
So
perfect.
we're meeting tomorrow at 1 to go over Holmes.
Yeah, bring your jacket.
But yeah, so it was a good meeting. Friendly and Royal discussed a really solid plan from ONGAP. So thank you for that. A really well thought out logistics plan, how to not really intrude on the school when it's open. Try to get as much done during the summer months, obviously, as possible. Everything has to be kept in mind that obviously the ideal situation is to get it all done during summer months when the school's not open, but obviously not possible. But at the same time, trying to get it done in a shorter time span than a longer one. Certainly, if there were more summer months involved, if we targeted more summer months and not interrupting the school, it would take the project a lot longer. So that was one topic that got brought up was some of the phasing and how it's going to impact the school. Inevitably, it's going to get impacted. So I think ONG and AP did a good job of trying to figure out the best case scenario of how we can do this. And obviously, they're very aware uh, of trying to not have too much of an impact on the schools when they are open and they have construction going. So there were some questions raised. We talked about some different options. Nothing set in stone on it yet. Um, and we're working with them to determine what the best way is for both parties involved. There's nothing major. Again, good protection from students when they're actually in school, and the buildings and the construction. Everything's as far away from the school and the students as possible. And we really didn't have too many issues with it, so everything was good from them.
So is there anything, what is next? Obviously there's the homes counterpart meeting, but is there a more refined plan that's going to be put out? Are we going to see a revision, or are we going to kind of go ahead
Yep.
with what was proposed?
Yeah, so the way I believe it left off was obviously we're just starting that tomorrow. The rest of it is a matter of there were some changes made after the last meeting and discussions. There was another draft of the plan sent around to everyone, but it's an ongoing discussion. So it's kind of this is what the plan is now, unless something changes or there's issues with roadways or machines getting in and out of the properties, then we may have to change stuff. But foundationally, this is what the logistic setups will be. And if we need to make small changes as we go to accommodate the school and the staff and the students and everything else, then they can do that.
Great. Okay. Any questions, points of discussion from members of the committee?
Chris, can I just
Thanks,
add
Jim.
one thing to that?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
right after shortly after the New Year, I believe it's the week of the 9th is when the meetings are going to commence with the school principals, at least Hinley and Royal, on the interior phasing approach. We broached this subject briefly last week. Just talked about starting to look at what capacity there was for swing space, knowing that we would be coming together for some discussions, and those will start in earnest the week of the 9th.
Now, are phasing, just a quick procedural question, are phasing plans something that are just happen in the ordinary course, or is that something that the state is going to need to review as part of their involvement in our project?
They will want to, when it comes time to bid the project, they're going to want to see phasing plans detailed in the bidding documents. But as far as their purview over it, it's really up to us to phase the project.
Okay.
But we have to stay within. Again, the goal is to stay within the confines of the budget and the schedule.
Right.
What they'll want to see too is when it comes to phasing, where we are separating construction activities from occupied activities. They're going to want to see all code compliant partitions for things for maintaining fire ratings and things like that.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Eric, yes.
We are meeting with Planning and Zoning on the 10th for Hindley and Royal, and those preliminary site plans should be shared as well, the construction plans with them. They're interested in seeing those, and they've mentioned that they're interested in seeing those. So we'll work with Dave to make sure that they get incorporated into our next presentation. And the same thing on the 24th when we meet on homes, they'll be interested in those.
Okay. Great. Dr. Adley?
Yeah, just to follow up on piggyback on David there, Kevin and I will be meeting with the principals prior to those series of meetings, just to do a preliminary look at the interior relocations in advance of that series of meetings going to take place.
Great. Okay. Terrific. And then the other thing, just you'll see it in our next topic. There discussions on interior design have really gotten moving, and that's well along as well. So I think as a next step, I'll turn it over to Travis and Eric and Joe Canis to walk us through the design development presentation, and also Dave Cravenzola and Dave Martin on where we stand in terms of, as folks recall, at each design stage, a cost estimation exercise is done with ONGAP's estimating team and the outside estimator retained by KG&D. And each time, they estimate based on each phase of the design, compared against the budget that we originally passed in the spring and presented to the state. So one of the things we'll cover momentarily is how we're doing against those budgets as we get deeper into design development. And we've done things, the design team has done things like respond to some of the ARB input, P&Z's input, neighbor input, and input from some of the other constituencies like the school district and the principals. So with that, I'll turn it over to the design team and Dave Martin.
Okay, so Travis has controls, but I guess I'll do a bunch of the speaking here. We spent the last 3 weeks doing cost estimating, as mentioned, with the 2 sets of cost estimators. They worked really hard. We got together late last week and reconciled those numbers, which basically means we looked at each of the line items, went down the list, made sure that both estimators were looking at the same project and that the numbers were relatively consistent. We're not looking for identical numbers. We're just looking to understand where both are. And so the first topic here will be, in terms of the agenda here, the first topic will be the budget discussion. When we're done with that, we'll go into the stormwater discussion. We'll review some of the exterior design issues and sort of modifications that may be considered. The interior design work, which we shared with the district yesterday and went through, and just give you kind of an overview of that, and then finally with next steps. In terms of action for the committee this evening, ultimately we want to confirm the direction for the stormwater design and approve the process to proceed with our construction documents. So in terms of the 3 phases of the design, we completed the schematic design. We just finished the design development stage. The next stage is the construction documents. With the completion of the construction documents, that's when we'll have a set of drawings and a specification that can go up to the state for permit and can go out to bid for construction. So the first part is the budget discussion. So if you can go to the next slide. Dave, I'll tee this up and then I'll turn it over to you, and you can go into any level of detail that you think that we should be sharing.
Sure thing.
But again, we had two independent estimators, ONG APC, as well as NASCO. The total project costs on the base bid, and that's including all contingencies and escalation, etc., brought Hindley in between $600,000 and $1.4 million under budget, which is good news. Holmes was between $1.8 and $2 million over budget, and Royal was between $700 and $1.4 million under budget. So that if we combine all three schools together, we have a range of somewhere between $1 million under budget to $700,000 over budget, which basically means at the end of design development, these projects, when you combine the three of them together, we're where we need to be to continue to proceed with the construction drawings. Because Holmes is over budget, we just wanted to take a second and the key takeaways there. The music and art addition, and the connecting corridor, as well as the entry pavilion, were added scope to the project in order to fully realize the requirements of ed specs. It's not that we didn't have music, the music addition there as part of it. It just was originally done in a different way, and when we looked at this kit of parts and where everything should actually fit in the building, the best location was to create a separate addition for that, and to pull out the lobby vestibule so that we have a clearer security vestibule for students who are entering the building. And so we were looking at right sizing classrooms and the appropriate adjacencies. We're looking at a more efficient and secure main entrance and vestibule. Another key takeaway for Holmes is, if you looked at the initial budgets, the lowest budget of the three schools was Holmes. It was a couple $1 million less than Hindley and Royal. And ultimately, when we were looking to meet the ed specs on that project, it brought that project up some, and and currently shows the other two schools down a little bit. And then the last takeaway really has to do with the site work, which was responding to neighbors' comments and making sure that we're providing what we need on this site to address stormwater, parking, vehicular circulation, pedestrian circulation, etc. When you're looking at the total project budgets, there's also contingency money as part of, because we're at design development, we don't have a full set of drawings. They're pretty well detailed, 100% of scope is there, but the estimators are still not looking at a 100% complete set. So the estimators are continuing to carry a 5% design contingency on all three projects, which is a total of about $3 million. At the end of construction documents, that $3 million actually gets absorbed into the project, because at that point they will have a full set of documents, and that design contingency will no longer be necessary. Also in that base work, we're currently carrying an abatement allowance of $2 million. There's a report that's being prepared in January where we'll have more information on hazardous materials in the building and what needs to be removed and what the potential costs of those are. But right now we're currently carrying somewhere between $600,000 and $700,000 per building. We also are carrying an escalation allowance, and that's just under $3 million. It's 2.9. This will be absorbed at bid time. That's because we're not bidding this project today. We're bidding this project later on this year, and the expectation is every quarter out, there's a certain amount of escalation or cost increase associated with projects. And so we're currently carrying, I believe it's somewhere in the 7% range for escalation. It might be a little bit less than that. And also there's a line item in, I'm sorry, Dave, is it?
It's 8% annually, So then we just take it to the, it's not a full 8% because of the time to bidding is less than a year. So we're not recognizing all 8%.
Thanks for clarification.
Yeah.
And then in the soft cost line, there's also an owner's contingency, which you carry throughout the project where you see fit to need to spend additional funding. You have $3 million, and that's in that overall budget as well. Next slide. Not in the base bid are a series of alternates. 2 cafeterias at the Hindley and Royal cafeterias. We were asked to consider alternates if we ultimately go out to bid, the bids come in low, and we have additional money at the beginning of the project, or as we go along the project, we find that we are not utilizing all the construction contingency or owner's contingency. You want to spend money on different items. The cafeterias at Hindley and Royal would be an add for the ceilings, acoustic ceilings and lighting of about $275,000. There's also a proposal for a green roof as an alternate at Hindley. Hindley has a 1-story building where the classrooms above would look down on that, so it would be potentially a nice addition, a nice aspect to look down on a green roof. It's a little bit of an educational tool as well. That's about $250,000. In our additions, we have slightly pitching classrooms for the music and art and some of the learning commons. And that wood metal / wood look ceiling is about a $250,000. It could be a savings of $250,000 if we went with a different type of ceiling. And then the Architectural Review Board asked us to potentially look at front entrance improvements at Royal and Hindley. No designs have been created at this point. If that was something that the building committee or board of ed was interested in us looking at, that cost we'd have to do some design work and then put some numbers associated with it. The key line items being reviewed by the design and estimating team, which we looked at last week and we're going to continue to look at as we go into the construction drawings. The first one is unsuitable soils, and that's how much removal and replacement of unsuitable soils will be required as part of this project. It's we have some estimates right now, but as we get deeper into the construction drawings, and Joe Canis and his team have more clear information, those unsuitable soils and that information may become a little bit clearer. Same thing with underground infiltration at homes in Hindley. We went from open storm basins to subsurface tanks that contain the water and then disperse it slowly. And we can continue to look at that. I know that work we've done a lot of work in the last couple of weeks on this issue, and we're planning to share this again with the planning and zoning this next month. And Joe has a little bit of a discussion to talk about in a few minutes about that. Underpinning. The estimators have carried underpinning. What underpinning is when you have an existing building, you're proposing a new building adjacent to an existing building. In our cases, we do have some basements which are below the finished floor, the bottom finished floor of the existing building. When you go too low below that and you put that addition too close to the building, you potentially have to do additional structural work to the existing building so that there isn't differential settlement. What we're currently doing and have done structurally is actually pulling those basements away from the existing building or stepping them down and stepping the foundations down so that we don't have underpinning or we have minimal underpinning. And so some of that underpinning number that's currently in the estimates we're looking at actually hopefully over the course of the next set of exercises structurally to reduce or eliminate most of the underpinning. We're also looking at structural steel. Steel costs this year have gone up substantially in terms of multiple times. And so the less steel we can put in and the reduction of weight of steel will reduce overall the overall project cost for each of these buildings. And some of the one-story structures we can actually do with cold form framing, which is light metal, as opposed to structural steel, I column type of construction, and that lightens it, and potentially we would realize some cost savings. Between part of the ed specs talks about the music rooms, and in the music rooms, we're required to provide an addition. In every classroom, we have sound separation, acoustic bat insulation between classroom walls. When we get to the music, there's an added layer of acoustic requirement so that that sound bleed of drums and guitars, etc., doesn't bleed to the next room. And then part of the discussion this last week is which walls are required to have that and which ones aren't. Party walls between two classrooms, we definitely need to have that additional layer of insulation. Party walls between classrooms and hallways, for example, is less critical. And so those walls are actually very expensive, and one consideration would be is to do the walls that are really essential to soundproof, and the other walls just put more of a standard layer of soundproofing on. The last item here is storefront glass versus curtain wall. It's a little bit of a sort of fussy detail, but curtain wall is a more expensive system than storefront. It's a structural system. Storefront will actually sit on a slab. So if you have a two-story piece of glass wall, if you have the second floor construction slab come out to accept the second floor of glass, those don't support the weight of the two-story, and the structural system for that is less expensive. The glass system is less expensive. So those are sort of the types of details that we look at between the design development and the construction drawing level, so that we can find ways to for cost savings, while at the same time still maintain the integrity of the overall project. Notes: schematic numbers aren't used for comparison because the baseline change between the additional roof and the Curtis property home scope has changed. So what we're saying is that we increased budgets from schematic design to design development. The committee went back to the board approved, or the town approved additional funding for the additional roofing work on all three schools, as well as the additional site work at homes. And estimates are shown will be used for the state DDR submission. Slight variations above and below budget is okay. So there's just a discussion. All this work that we've been preparing for budget-wise will be utilized this next month when we go back to the state for the next review. Travis. And with this, I think I'll turn it over to Dave, and Dave, you can talk about the three projects and any sort of detail that you think is important beyond what I've already mentioned.
Honestly, good news and bad news is, good news is that we're well aligned and that you covered everything. The bad news is that I think you stole 100% of my thunder with the budget conversation. So hey, that's all right. It was an efficient presentation. No, seriously though, Eric really, put it in perspective of where we are overall. And I think just, looking at some of the values here, you see some six digit and 7-digit, variances in some spots. When looking at projects of this size, it's also helpful to think of things in the context of percentages. So just kind of quickly, if we look at Henley, I'll refer to our estimates here. It's, that 618,000, that equates to a little less than 2.25% of the budget. When we get to homes, that one's just over 8%. And then with Royal, it's a little less than 2.5% under budget. So while some of the values may look a little larger printed out on a percentage basis, really they're within the parameters that we feel comfortable with. Eric talked about some strategies we're looking at I know specifically at Holmes too, knowing that we're over there, I think that underpinning conversation is going to evolve and hopefully yield some savings there that could be, to the tune of several $100,000. So, we have some work to do as the design evolves and we get into construction documents. But generally, the general trajectory is good as far as where we are here at design development.
Dave, you just may want to say, going back to that last slide, Travis, that the two estimators develop their numbers slightly differently. The bottom line is the same and the same amount of information is there, but you look at it from a construction management point of view, and so you do your hard costs and then you pull out for CM staff, your contingencies, etc., as separate numbers, whereas NASCO builds those into their numbers above. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct. And we end up getting to essentially the same spot. I mean, when you look at those deviations between our two estimates, again, they're all, really in very small percentage points off from one another, which is good. It means that, both estimating teams looked at the same set of documents and are considering some of the same factors when putting the numbers together.
Why don't we, if you guys don't mind, why don't we just stop here for a second before we go into the design aspects of the presentation and see if any members of the committee have any questions or discussion points with regard to the cost estimations that have been done in the design development phase. It'd be easier than circling back after, a bunch more time spent on design.
I don't have anything. Thank you for doing all this. It looks good. Thank you.
Dave Martin, any thoughts or questions? I know you studied this pretty carefully.
No, I'm good. I think we're in a good spot at this point, and Eric did a good job of highlighting the areas that are still under investigation that may end up potentially saving us some money. And I certainly hope we'll be able to find a few of those things. Obviously, there are a couple of the items on the add alternate list that I thought would be useful to include if we were able to do so when we get to that point.
And just as a reminder to everybody, you all know this, but these are 3 separate projects with 3 separate estimates. So we need to continue to treat them that way, even though the estimates do show, and Eric talked about a blended comparison to the budget. That's more just a point of information because as we're not able to reallocate between schools as folks know. Any other comments? If not, back to Eric and Travis and Joe. I'm sorry, Jill, go ahead.
Yeah, you may have said it already, but just in case it bears repeating that we're looking to be, we're looking to be, I'm sorry, at least within 5% or less of our estimate, correct? And so all of our numbers have come in fairly significantly below that number.
Right.
So just in terms of creating a baseline for the committee to understand the efficacy of this process to date.
Well, we're not Holmes is over the 5% threshold, and again, that number is, I think you have to take it in context of what is left to be done. I think given some of the value engineering strategies that Eric outlined, that the 8% on Holmes is likely a gap that we can close as we move into construction documents. Eric, did I represent that to your liking?
We will work to close that. I'm not sure we'll get that full 8%, but we will work to close it. Yes, absolutely. And as you know, there's contingency money that will be utilized during this next phase towards that.
But just in terms of thank you, and appreciate that clarification, but just in terms of also the validity of our numbers. I think it's also worth knowing that a lot of those homes numbers are decisions that we made versus wild swings in for example, not being able to predict material costs and things like that. So anyway, I think overall, although we've made some decisions to increase our budget, we're still pretty close in line.
Okay. Thanks for letting us address that before we got into the design part of it.
Okay, so our next discussion is stormwater at Hindley and Holmes. And with this, I'm going to turn it over to Joe Canos, and he can talk about Hindley first. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, great. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everybody. Based upon our Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, as well as the meetings that we've had here at the Building Committee, where neighbors offered their input, as well as getting some comments from the peer reviewer for the project, we've made some revisions to the stormwater management design at Hindley. Initially, in the upper yellow square, we had proposed a at-grade detention pond in that area. We listened to some of the comments and concerns from the neighbors to the south, and we've changed it over to an underground stormwater chamber system. So what we're looking at is a field of plastic chambers. This is typical stormwater management design. That sits on a bed of crushed stone that's about 12 inches deep. And is surrounded by crushed stone. So the void space in the chamber combined with the void space in the crushed stone holds that stormwater, and it's allowed to infiltrate into the ground, or it's also released through a controlled release slowly into the stormwater drainage system. So what we've done here is we're infiltrating the western part of the existing building, that roof. We're also infiltrating the proposed addition roof, as well as the courtyard, into that top yellow box there. So that's our upper chamber system. And then what we're doing is we're taking the runoff from the parking lot, as well as the drains immediately between the proposed addition and the existing school. And we're directing those around to our discharge point near Hindley. And they merge together at a splitter manhole. So we have the discharge from the upper chamber system, as well as the balance of the drainage from the western part of the site arrives at that splitter manhole. And what that manhole does, it does send some flow south toward pasture lane through the easement, through the existing pipe. We had a meeting a couple weeks ago with DPW, both Director Ed Gentile and Assistant Director Darren Austafine, and they both expressed an interest in maintaining some flow to the south through that easement because that runoff does provide stormwater to some wetlands that are further down pasture lane, and they did not want to cut off the flow completely. So that splitter manhole, what it does, the low flow from small storms will continue going to the south. But in heavier storms, what happens is the water rises inside that manhole and then discharges to the west towards Nearwater. What we had to do, one of the requests from DPW was to not increase the flow to Nearwater. So we had to include a second detention system in the design. It's a chamber system. It's a little bit smaller than the upper one, roughly half the size. It's also made up of smaller chambers as well. And that reduces the peak flow headed towards Nearwater to at or below existing conditions for the 2, 10, 25, 15, 100-year storms. So we're actually reducing peak flow in both directions, to Nearwater and to the south to Hindley. So there is a flood attenuation on the site. So we'll be discharging less flow and volume in the future than we are today in both directions. We're also doing some regrading along the property line. It doesn't show up too well, but if you look at that upper box immediately to the right of that, There are some catch basins there that we're regrading those so that they capture more stormwater. Based on some of the videos that we saw from the Henley neighbors, it looks like that there's some bypass there that, and looking at the grading plan, it does get around those catch basins and overflows on the adjacent property. Here, what we're doing is we're proposing some subtle grading changes, which will better capture that water and direct it into the underground system. The overall reduction in peak flow as a result of this system in the 100-year storm event is on the order of about 40%. So it's a pretty significant reduction.
Just briefly, real quick before you jump to homes, just 2 points I'd like to make for the record. Joe, thank you very much. One is Joe noted this, that we had a really productive meeting with Ed Gentile and his staff from Department of Public Works because of the fact we recognize both Henley and Holmes, our neighborhood schools. And so we want to make sure the town had input on what was going on here, that we were coordinating with them. And then a point that Joe made, we asked specifically DPW, when they're doing stormwater projects around town, what standard they design to, and they noted that they designed to manage a 50-year storm. And as Joe noted, that the systems that we're putting in place or proposing to put in place at both Henley and Holmes are being designed to account for the 100-year storm. So it's an upgrade over what is otherwise the town DPW standard for stormwater. I just wanted to make those 2 points before we shift gears and go to Holmes.
Okay, so what you see here is Holmes, and this one we've already indicated that we would be moving to an underground retention system. What is different here is that we've shifted the location a bit in recognition of some of the comments that we get from our peer reviewer and the development of the logistics drawings. The location where we had previously proposed it, which was more a little bit towards the northeast at the top of the service driveway, is that we wanted it to be outside the influence of construction equipment as much as possible. So we did shift it over to the field. And as a result of that, you'll see that proposed location, the currently proposed location on the west side in the yellow box. And so what that does, but otherwise it operates the same as it was previously proposed. There's an outlet control structure that controls the release over time, and it discharges into the depression immediately north of Holmes. We've also designed a system, checked it for the 2 through the 100-year storm events, and we are producing peak flow and volume reductions in all the storm events compared to existing conditions. What this system does, it also, in addition to taking runoff from the proposed additions, it also accepts runoff from the upper parking too. So that right now that parking area discharges unmitigated, untreated into that depressed area north of the school. What we're doing now is we're actually collecting that, putting that into the ground. We're infiltrating it, and as a result, we're reducing the peak flow and the volume from discharge from the site. The other feature that we've added also was in response to some neighbor concerns about some flooding along the soccer field, which is along the west property line. What we're doing there is 2 things. First, we're adding a curtain drain that will run the length of the field. So that'll intercept runoff as it comes off the field and put it back into the basin instead of having a surface discharge that ponds on top of that basin. We're putting it directly into the basin and also promoting some infiltration because it is a curtain drain, so it does have some infiltration capacity there. The other thing that we're doing also is that the grate on the structure out there is pretty small. It's easily clogged. I know that was one of the concerns of the homeowner. So what we're actually proposing is a larger structure. It's a basic what we call a double catch basin, and it's exactly what you imagine it would be. It's a catch basin that has a grate twice as big as a typical catch basin. What that allows is it allows more surface area. It's less prone to clogging, and we're replacing that existing basin there with a much larger basin. Again, this was discussed with DPW. They agreed with the general concept. Obviously, they'll need to take a look at the analysis in the end, as will a peer reviewer. But again, in this case, we are reducing peak flow and runoff for all storms from the site.
Thanks, Joe.
And so this is the design work that we will be sharing with the Planning and Zoning Commission as well in January. I guess at this point, similar to the cost discussion, if we have a discussion associated with stormwater, we probably should have it now before we move on.
Yeah, why don't we, if any members of the committee, any members of the committee have any questions as it relates to stormwater, why don't we take those up now? Hearing none. I mean, I'd like to keep the public comment piece of this until you've gone all the way through your presentation, so we don't do it in multiple phases, and we can just cover any public comment as it relates to any aspects of the design. And if we need to put slides back up, we can do that. So why don't we just keep moving?
So this next discussion is on the exterior, and we're not going into great detail. It's just areas of interest that have either been modified or are discussion points about that the Architects Review Board has brought to our attention. So next slide. So the ARB has asked us to look at the two entrances, our main entrance, which is on the left, and the bus loop access point, which is down at the bottom where the existing library is. Next slide. So in response to ARB comments, our landscape architects have looked at the front of Hindley and provided a whole landscape plan associated with the green space to the left and to the right of the main entrance, as well as all the hardscape, the sidewalks and the entrance area in front of the building. So currently you can see that the sidewalk today is asphalt and has a concrete section right in the middle. The proposal in the future is the entire sidewalk will be a new concrete sidewalk. And then there's an inlay in the middle. You can see a sort of a reddish square in the middle there. That's planned to be a brick paver inlay into that. And then there's benches that are part of this. We're reusing the existing pear trees are to stay, but there's a whole sort of additional set of plantings that are planned in the beds to the left and to the right. We did present this to the Architects Review Board. I think their response was lukewarm in terms of I'm not sure they feel that this entrance is strong enough for the school, which I'm not sure we agree with. And we think that this is a very nice entrance. It's appropriate for the age group. And you know, I think it's something that at the building committee level or perhaps the design committee level, we should continue to have a discussion as to whether or not we want to do anything more with this, or this is as far as we're going. And you know, as far as the plan scope of work and the ed specifications, this is the level of detail that would have been expected. A greater level of detail is beyond the base ed specifications that were provided for this project. Next slide. So on the west side, where the bus loop is being expanded to the south, If you look at the upper left, that's the existing photograph where you can see the library, which is planned to be demolished. The upper right photograph or rendering there shows this plaza that has been created and presented, and directly below that is what it would look like at street level with this new plaza that leads up to the original entrance. Again, the ARB felt that this might be a little strong. If this isn't the primary entrance, it looks like you're recreating the original entrance here, and it might be stronger than the existing entrance that we have on the north side. A very quick rendering on the left there was just an idea. If we decided to listen to what the ARB was saying, one solution would be to not play up this plaza as such a important experience, and to actually have an alley of trees that are streetscape trees along the drop-off sidewalk, and that we would still have walkways that led to the front door, but we didn't emphasize it as such a grand expression as the way that we had been sharing it with everybody. Next slide, please. Shifting over to homes. There has been comments, I think that this is at the P and Z level, about parking and how much parking should be shared, should be at homes. Our ed specifications talk about providing 95 parking spaces at all 3 of these schools. To get to 95 at homes, we are now proposing to have on the north end of the north lot about 10 spaces, on the south end of the south lot an additional 5 or 6 spaces. We could do that all at once. We could do a portion of it, hold off, see if that accommodates the need, and if it doesn't, construct the balance of the parking at another date. But that's really a discussion at the committee and the board level as to whether we want to do all this as base bid or any portion of it as a potential alternate. And then the other arrows here talk about the music wing and main entrance addition. If we can go to the next slide. This shows the existing conditions, looking from the parking lot, looking at the original 1939 building, I believe, and the 2098 edition, the cafeteria edition on the right, 2 different types of architectures or vernacular. Next slide. So this was the most recent update. This is the addition that shows on the right, and I'm referring to the larger top rendered view here. On the right is the new music wing addition. In the middle is the connecting corridor that leads from the lobby to that music addition. And on the left is the new entrance pavilion and vestibule. That vestibule, by pulling it out, it reaches out to the students when they get dropped off in inclement weather. It's easy to go straight from that covered entrance area directly to your car without getting too wet. And it also, by pulling that vestibule out, creates a clear pathway from the rest of the building to the music wing and back and forth without having that security vestibule in the way. That security vestibule also leads directly to the welcome desk straight ahead, so that there's visual contact between that welcome desk and this vestibule. So that's fairly important. In terms of the architecture here, you can see that has pitch roofs, reminiscent of the original building. ARB had mentioned that maybe instead of standing seam roof, we might want to have a synthetic slate. That's a nice suggestion. I think that there, one other comment had to do with a little bit of the vernacular here, I think mostly associated with the entrance pavilion, that they were, to be quite honest, looking for something a little bit more modern. If you go to the next slide, this is where we were. So at the end of schematic design, this is what was presented at the end of design development. That last set of slides is where we have landed, where we want to be, and where we think it's an appropriate solution for the age of the kids that are going to the school, as well as the architecture that is adjacent to it. So I just want to show this because they had talked about something that was more modern, in our opinion, and I believe in some of the the committee members that we've discussed this with. If you can go back to the previous slide, Travis, that this design and architectural vernacular is more appropriate here and feels more comfortable in this setting. Okay, if you can go 2 slides ahead. This is an aerial view of that. You can see that there's still green space in front, between the drop-off and the additions as proposed. To the right of the building, you can see the service driveway that wraps around to the back and will provide great access to the kitchen for deliveries, as well as garbage and waste to exit to not have to cross the student playground on the other side of the building. Next slide. This shows the entrance area and plan. It's our landscape plan, which shows some of the similar details to what we had just talked about at Hindley. Instead of asphalt sidewalks, these will all be concrete sidewalks. There will be a brick paver entry pad in front of the building, and that there's landscape features, both vertical trees and bushes, as well as more two-dimensional ground cover as part of this design. Before you go ahead, this actually shows pretty well that vestibule. Travis, if you can point out that vestibule. See, that vestibule does not interrupt the circulation path from the lobby to the music wing. So that corridor is free and clear, where today, if you've been out there recently, there's a vestibule that sits in the middle of the lobby. That this vestibule is out proud of it. Next slide. The only discussion point at Royal has to do with parking. Similar to homes, we're providing 2 different areas for additional parking. Parking currently is something in the range of 7 to 8 parking spaces. We're looking at 8 additional parking spaces at the corner of Royal and Mansfield, and there's an additional 8 to 10 spaces that are potentially added over by where the existing dumpster and drop-off is. Again, I think there was a discussion at the planning and zoning level as to whether or not we would want to construct both parking areas at the same time, or do one of them potentially as an alternate. If we need that additional parking, we have the designs in place and we could construct it at that point. Next slide. One other comment that the Architectural Review Board stated is that they really were hoping that we would address all 3 main entrances and bring the exterior appearance up a level, since we're doing so much work in the rest of the building. The ed specs and our architectural charge was not to address the outside of the main entrance. But if this is something that the committee or board would be interested in, we could look at this entrance in terms of if there's maybe a different architectural expression on the facade. Maybe there's cast stone at the entrance to give it a little bit more pizzazz, or sort of a more of a direct visual as to where the entrance is, and maybe the blue eyebrow, blue wave entrance canopy was a different shape or form, or a little bit more contemporary, that it could act as a little bit stronger feature. We also have very little vertical landscape in front of this building. It looks like there's 1 tree at the far right side there. Talking with the landscape architects, there could be a series of trees along here, not significantly super large ones, but more ornamental trees that could provide a little bit more interest to this elevation. And with that, I think that's the last slide for this section. Yes. So with that, similar to the other two, if there's questions or comments associated with the exterior work that's being proposed here, now would be a great time to talk about.
Eric, it sounds like there's some areas where you need decisions from us. Do you need us to opine on whether or not we want to do all the parking or split it in half, for example?
So with the parking, we're going to design it. At the 11th hour, we're going to look at all three projects and try to find areas where work can potentially be a lower priority and perhaps pulled out as an alternate, so that in the case that the construction industry is very busy and bids don't come in where we would like them to be, that we can still award the projects because we have some play in terms of having these alternates. So that would be one example. Maybe some of this parking would be an alternate so that it could be done at a later date if we have the funding or not.
Okay.
So I guess to answer your question, no, we don't need a decision today. We will be designing it. We will need a decision at some point when we're talking about alternates or providing additional alternates, where we should find that. I think we will make some suggestions, and we'll look for you to ultimately make the decisions as to what should be base and what 5% can be potentially pulled out.
Okay.
Go ahead. Did you have another one, Joe?
Yeah. Thank you. Speaking of alternates, in our original set of alternates, if there is one, we listed paving as a possibility, something we could potentially be looking at. I didn't see it in the list of alternates at the beginning of the project. Is it still in our list of alternates? Has something changed? What's the status of that, please?
That is a Dave question. I have to turn that over to him.
Yep. Let me just check here and see if we did. Again, it's not reflected at all in the budget numbers that we presented because of the fact that it is an alternate. So that budget was reflective of the base scope of work. However, just looking at.
So your answer, Jill, is no, it's not in the base currently.
Right.
But
And I don't see it, Jill, I don't see it actually in the DD estimate. That may have been an oversight just because the scope was not. It was an alternate that we had kind of brought up. It wasn't in the documents, so it likely fell off the list. But essentially, that value would carry through from D to DD because that same amount of existing work would have to be redone under that
But
alternate.
Dave, I think a lot of that was incorporated into the DD drawings, and Joe Canis might want to jump in here. But we've done more sidewalk work and we've done more paving work associated. I'm thinking Hindley right now, in front of the Hindley front door, wrapping around that whole bus circle. All that sidewalk and all that pavement is part of the base project now, which I don't think it was during the schematic design estimate. Joe, can you confirm that?
That's correct, Eric. We did have some limited sidewalk improvements at Hindley, but I believe they terminated at the right side of that front entry. Now we're extending beyond that, and we're also doing some additional sidewalk improvements a little bit to the south of that. At Holmes, we always did have some sidewalk replacement there, just because of the proximity of the new interior courtyard. That new corridor that connects the music wing to the front entrance area. But yeah, it's definitely the largest increase in additional sidewalk has been at Hindley.
So that's also important in terms of we are replacing some playgrounds, or we're shifting some playgrounds temporarily back and forth. We're creating some new playgrounds, and again, I'm thinking of Hindley in the back of Hindley. So Dave, I think as we spend a little bit more time in these estimates, we just want to confirm that we have all that accounted for. I believe that we do because it was shown on the drawings, but you may want to go back to the team and just confirm with the team.
Yeah, so I'm confident that if it's on the drawings, it's in the estimate. So what would happen then is the add alternate value would be reduced because more work is being done in the base than in the what would be an add alternate.
So just to close the loop on the sidewalks, again, it sounds like most of the work has actually been incorporated into our design. Will we continue to see any sort of alternate that we'd be managing for paving that might make sense to incorporate? Or are we at the point where we feel like most of what we'd want to do is probably actually now in the design, in the DD documents?
So Jill, if I can answer that, I would think that we would probably want a site walk with our design development drawings, and Joe should be there, and we should show the areas that are being replaced. And if you see sidewalks or other pavement areas that aren't on those drawings, that would be either alternate work or needed to be incorporated into our drawings as part of the construction drawing set.
Because I would just jump in, because right now, as it stands, there are definitely sidewalks and pavement areas that are not slated to be redone, and they will likely abut new work. So we should clearly identify that so everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, and I think obviously as part of that, understand what we think the incremental additional cost would be to upgrade those areas.
Yes, I agree, Chris. And I agree with the sidewalk. Thank you. On homes, do you need any direction from the committee on the exterior, Eric?
Only that you agree with the direction that we're currently going, that our design development shows with the pitched roofs and the new pavilion that's out there, that you believe that that's their direction. The one comment I'll make is that I'd say that the connector and the music wing are in pretty good shape. We'll just be refining details. I think the entrance pavilion itself, and I think Travis is probably going back to that. The entrance pavilion, we're going to look at a little bit more and just make sure that we're all set that that's the right direction. I don't think that affects us in terms of the DD approval. I think that we will be coming back with you during construction drawings if we have some alternative ideas here, just to get the committee and the design, both the building committee and design committees of review and approval on that.
Okay, so
Sorry,
can
that
you
was
show?
long-winded.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is you're recommending we stay with the pitched roofs, but we just do want to hear from the committee whether or not and administration, I think, whether or not that's the direction we want to stay with the caveat that ARB wasn't sure where they were. There was some request to, make the buildings, I don't know, I think integrated a little bit better, and then I'm not sure this was the first choice, but we don't know. We don't know what the first choice is necessarily at this stage either. Correct.
Well, obviously, if for some reason the building committee doesn't think that this should be the direction, then we should know about it, because we're going to be
Right.
developing, and quite honestly, January 2nd, when we come back, we have to go full steam ahead with our construction drawings, because I think at the end of this, Dave is going to be talking a little bit about schedule, and we have a very short window of time to do our construction drawings. So yes, I guess we are asking for approval of this design, that this is the direction that the committee recommends and will recommend to the board.
Okay, then maybe can we hear from Alan and Paula, and certainly if Natasha and Carrie want to jump in. And then maybe Dave, if there's anything you would add from a construction point of view, and then maybe committee members have questions.
I love this design. I think it pulls the building together really nicely. I think it makes sense. We got to see this recently, and I just feel like it is way better than the original one.
I think it's beautiful. It works well. I think it sets the school up well. Separate sort of question, Eric, in terms of the concrete and stuff and the walkways. You said about the brick inlays, insets in a couple of the schools there. Has Kevin chipped in on that in terms of maintenance and so on for snow? Maybe it's a question, a later question, but just that those brick insets is that maintenance easy in terms of snow and removal and chipping and so on and so forth. That's just maybe it's not a question for now, but
Well, it's a good point. When you're talking about pavers, they have joints. They're not quite as smooth as the concrete that's on adjacent areas, but at the same time, it's fairly easy to plow and sweep to make sure that it's clean and easily walkable. And these pavers are designed for this purpose. There's pavers like this in downtown Darien. If you walk on the streets, you'll see this similar brick pavers. So this isn't uncommon in town or the region.
is it the regular brick size pavers?
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, the bigger question, the building here, I like a lot.
And also, because we've had so many issues with flat roofs and leaking and things over the years, I love that these roofs are pitched because the snow will come off them and not melt into the ceilings.
Well, you do realize we are doing a roofing project as part of this, and so that there's additional $4 million worth of flat roof work that's being done on the 3 different schools. So the expectation is at the end of this project, you will not have leaking roofs. And if they do leak, they'll be on under warranty for another 20 years. So we'll be able to fix them.
Thank you.
So question from a process standpoint in terms of, so we have Architectural Review Board has weighed in. They've told us, you know, here's some things we would like to see done differently. But yet you also need to get going on construction, construction drawings. To what extent can you proceed with the construction drawings while we're still thinking about to what extent we're going to be responsive to ARB? You know, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, you know, to me, it's a balancing act. You know, there's the would be nice to haves, there's the gotta haves, and then overlaying all of that is the ed specs and the budget. And so while I appreciate the input from the ARB, we now have a better feel for how we are stacking up against our budget and how much room we have to move. But to what extent, you know, can the balance of the construction drawings proceed while we're still ruminating over, gee, do we do things differently to the entrance at Royal, or do we take a different approach to the entrance at Hindley, et cetera?
I would say this is Dave. I mean, I would say from a schedule standpoint, the committee needs to press on with the trajectory based on the scope of work that was originally contemplated. I think to ask the design team to pause and consider some of these things would drastically change the deliverable date for their design documents, which just has the ripple effect on the project. Right. I don't think you have time for those type of wholesale changes in the project right now.
Thank you, Dave.
Well, meaning I'm sorry, just to clarify though, meaning what? Meaning we have to decide now or very, very soon how much we're willing to do to address ARB, or you can press ahead with everything else.
I think some of those items, I don't know, Eric, your thoughts on this, but they would almost have to follow a path of, they would be a change in scope that would follow the rest of the documents. I mean, the main construction documents package really needs to proceed in earnest at this point.
So what we're talking about here is a very, very small part of the overall project.
99%. That's what I was hoping you were going to say.
99% of this project is going to proceed forward as quickly as we can move this forward. The one area on these 3 projects that may lag behind because of this ARB issue has to do with these 3 entrances. So it has to do with, in this picture in front of us, that vestibule at the left-hand side of this drawing. It doesn't affect the corridor, and doesn't affect the music suite at all, and it doesn't affect anything else in this building. When you get to Hindley, it's only the front facade of Hindley and whether or not we're doing anything else other than what is currently on those documents. And at Royal, we saw that photograph of the existing conditions at Royal. Right now, we're doing everything beyond that facade. That's all part of the work that we're hoping tonight that you say, please proceed with construction drawings, go full steam ahead. If you say, hey, Eric and Travis, we think that you should be doing a design study on that front facade to see if there's something that we can do that's maybe is an alternate. And if we have money to do it, we could add a little pizzazz to that entrance. We can look at that. And if we can fit it in our budget, or if we can fit it into the schedule, fine. But 99% of this project is not affected by those entrance decisions.
All right, great. Now that's exactly the clarification I was hoping to get. I mean, in terms of, well, Jill, let me just finish my point if I could. It would be good to know. I mean, the cost component of it is critical, right? I mean, you guys could go crazy and design the most beautiful entrances ever seen, but in order to consider those, we needed to consider them with the overlay of potential cost increases. Do you suggest at this point, or do you even have the capacity to do it if we said to do it, to do the exercise of here are some alternatives that we might be able to put in front of ARB, or is that just going to be a distraction from the more important construction drawing work that you need to do?
So use 2 words, capacity and distraction. And if Travis turns his microphone on, which I hope he doesn't, he would say that we don't have the capacity and we don't want or need the distraction at the moment. In terms of homes, our charge is to make sure that this new entrance is as good as it can be within the budget that we have, and that it's appropriate. And we're going to continue to refine this to make sure that we're happy and you're happy with that. In terms of Hindley's entrance, I think what we're doing from a landscape point of view and a hardscape point of view is appropriate. And
Right.
I don't think that we need to go any farther than that. I think the one thing that we could consider doing is stepping back the entrance on the bus entrance in terms of the whole plaza. We would like a reaction from you all on that as to whether or not we should still provide a plaza, or whether just downplaying that and have walkways to that secondary entrance is more appropriate. And before you answer that, the third one, Royal's the only one where I think there could be some facade treatment to make that entrance a little bit more special or a little bit more pronounced on that elevation, because it's all just a fairly plain vanilla brick across it with some fairly simple punched opening windows that, I don't know, if we had cast stone at that entrance, immediately adjacent to that entrance, and we changed that canopy so it was a little bit nicer, that would be the only area, in my opinion, that if we had extra money, maybe that would be a nice place to spend it. But
well, on Hindley, why don't we go back to those 2 photos, the 2 renderings, and maybe get Carrie's and Dr. Adley's input. I mean, I'll give you my 2 cents, which is it seems kind of counterintuitive that we would dial back what looks like a really impressive design because it somehow takes away from the main entrance. But that's, I mean,
Yeah.
I think we would find that down the road we would regret making that decision. But I think that's one person's view, and Kerry and Dr. Adley, and it's their school much more than it's mine.
So my immediate reaction to that is I didn't like the one with the trees in the front of it. Kids will find their own way. There'll be new paths that will be made over the grass. I don't like the fact that you can't see clearly the entrance in the sense of security. I personally look just maybe I'm on my own in that disposition, but I like the plaza type thing.
I agree with Dr. Adley about kids are going to end up getting off those buses, because that's really what that entrance is going to be used for, is the students who are getting on buses and getting off buses. And they're just going to end up walking over the grass. And if you look at the other picture of Hindley with the front entrance, you will see that the grass in the front of our school, the other entrance to the school, if you sort of look in the real picture to the left and you can't really see it on the right, you can see more to the left. Do you see how the dirt is worn there? That's because right now all the kids get off their buses and walk around the front of the school to the side entrances on the other side. And they have worn down the grass to the point where it would take major rehabilitation to bring that back. So I think Dr. Adley is right that over time in the front entrance, kids would be getting off buses and just walking, over the grass, and it would end up looking like dirt paths all through the grass area.
I also think just for supervision and security, it's just not the best design, personally. But
we weren't advocating for it. We were just using this as a point of discussion. So this discussion is excellent, because those are the types of points that when we go back in front of the ARB and we say we're doing this for this reason, we're going to quote this type of the points that are made right here. So thank you.
Thoughts from any other committee members, so that we can maybe I know we have to approve these holistically, but thoughts from the committee members on this point?
Hey, Chris, it's Jameson. I was just going to say that Eric made a point about it being alternates, possibly. To me, I think that's the best case scenario at this point, is you have it as an alternate to change the facades that the ARB is asking for, if we have budget and time and capacity and all those things as the project goes on. I think we've made so much direction on these decisions already that it's kind of silly to go backward when we're already trying to move this whole thing forward and have made good designs that everybody agrees on already. So I would say to just continue moving forward as we were. Alternate would be the option.
Dave Martin, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I like the current design for the Homes project with the pitched roof. I think it makes it look like it fits into the neighborhood better than a straight vertical face that was from the first go round. So I would stay with the pitched roof and the entry that has been designed here. I like it. I think it's the nicest one that I've seen. On the Royal entrance, I would love to see Eric and his team come up with some ideas to sort of spiff that up just a little bit to make it a little more consistent with these two schools to the extent that we can without, blowing the budget. At least come up with some ideas for it within, what they believe is appropriate. On the Hindley one, I'm going to defer to the Dr. Adley and the educational folks. They like that doing the courtyard on that side by the bus entry, so I would stick with that unless our hand gets forced to do something different.
Thank you. Jill?
I'm comfortable keeping the Hindley bus entrance as designed for the reasons outlined. I also like the Homes design with the pitched roofs, so I'm comfortable keeping that.
Great.
With Royal, and I'm sorry, back on Hanley, I'm comfortable using landscaping to update the other entrance. I think that's appropriate. I can see the point on Royal. I would be willing to look at an alternate there, if pretending that Eric hadn't said anything about capacity. I think, but it would truly have to be an alternate, and it might be fairly low down on our list. So I think, I think it's important to be clear that while the Holmes entrance is in our scope because we've actually changed the entrance as part of the addition, Henley, and updating the pedestrian entrance to Henley beyond landscaping and some paving, or updating the Royal entry, the facade, are outside of our scope. So again, I'm comfortable looking at Royal as an alternate. That's my points on the 3 schools.
Thank you. Okay. With
Chris,
that,
can I
let's
ask a
keep going. I
question?
guess we have I'm sorry, Sarah?
Yep, I'd like to ask a question. So when we talk about leaving Royal as an alternate, which I would agree with also, I can appreciate the points about redoing the drawings and the length of time. If we were to leave that to a later date and then make the decision to go ahead and change that entrance at Royal, how long would that delay the process? Or is this kind of, Eric, as you said, smaller and this can wait till later? I just don't know how it would materially affect the construction drawing process or the approval process.
Well, it depends on what you mean by later. If we went out to bid with this project without going out to without a design for Royal, it came in under budget, we had extra money, and you said, KGD, would you go back and look at Royal and do something nice with Royal, because we feel that we have some money that we can spend to amplify that entrance? We would do that design work. We would have to, I think we'd have to go through a state approval process probably to do that, unless somehow we sort of put a placeholder showing that this was generally what we're doing to begin with. And then Dave would have to bid that work out separately on a later date. Now, remember that these projects are going to be 2 years in construction. So if we did this work and this got bid out a year in, there's no reason why the project couldn't finish with this work being completed. But
Eric, just one thing on that though. If we're talking about, like, if the work we're talking about adding though is in the area where we're touching it in the first phase with additions, right? I mean,
no, I'm just referring to Royal here. I think the other 2 projects are already. I think we decided what we're doing on the other 2 projects. It's really just Royal right here, and this would be a self-contained, probably summer project, and it'd probably be the second summer. Can you go to the elevation, Travis? The photograph. Yeah, that one. So, for example, if we were to put cast stone, right, if you're looking at the photograph on the lower photograph there with the blue doors and the blue canopy, if that area and the 2 windows above, that whole box area was done in cast stone and that canopy was taken out and we did a nicer canopy there and we put some better landscaping to the left and to the right of this, and we said that's what we can do to make sure that that the front entrance is a little better defined and a stronger statement. That's the type of thing that, Dave, and you have to answer this, I think we could do over the summer and the second summer and get that done. We just would need to make sure that we had bid that out well in advance so that we had enough time to get the canopy constructed and all the material on campus to be done. But it's in a separate area, so there's no reason why we couldn't do that work at the same time as we're finishing work elsewhere when school is not in session.
I don't know how that works with state submissions. I mean, but I guess if you're not getting reimbursed on this, I don't know if that matters, because for them to consider anything, they have to be fully realized alternates.
it wouldn't even be bid out. It would be, this would just be a change. You would issue a PR saying add this scope. We would price it, and you say, yeah, we go ahead with the change. We don't go ahead with the change, and then listen, we can try to submit it as an eligible cost and see what OSCGNR says. I mean, if we can make some argument for, I don't know, it's better security, safety, something you can try, but again, and I think as far as how long it would take to build it really just depends on what the scope of the work is. So if we're trying to make something where we could add it onto the project and do it in, within say 8 weeks of a summer, we just have to make sure that as that design evolves, that it's a design that we could actually pull off in that amount.
So we're sort of, I'm sorry, Jill, we're sort of having this discussion in a public session here. I would state that we would recommend to you that maybe we show a concept to ARB this month when we go back, but we do not include that work as part of the work that we're trying to complete in February. And that if we have, after we go out to bid, if we find that we're in good shape, then maybe you authorize us to do a full set of design documents and construction drawings, and we bid it out later, as Dave mentioned.
So I think that's the question, because is the answer that this is not something we can include as an alternate at this time?
I just think we have 1 month really to put together, or 2 months to put together a set of drawings, and for us to race through and to try to come up with a design that everybody's on board with and get approvals and get this thing put together and out the door.
Okay.
We're trying to accelerate something that really should take time. It's your front door. We want to do it right.
Okay, so I think the answer then for tonight is there is not time to include it as an alternate. We need to focus on the actual defined scope of the project, and we can revisit this at a later date. I don't even know that we need to do a rendering for ARB right this minute. We can just tell them where we are in space. And they can continue to argue with us if they like, but this was not part of our scope.
We agree
That's
with
how
that.
I see it.
Agreed. Yeah.
All right, if that's enough with the exterior, maybe we can go to the interior now.
Yep.
So yesterday, the design committee and administrators had an opportunity to see the design discussion. And Travis, I think I'll let you just sort of go through these points, and then we can talk about the interiors very briefly.
Yeah, I think the key points of the interior design are that these layouts are all based on previous user group discussions that we've had with the district and the personnel there. We've met with the art teachers, the music teachers, the librarians, and the principals. So this is a reflection of that. We wanted to create a consistent look and feel across all the schools in the material palette, but also recognize that they are different schools, so there would be unique opportunities to include school-specific elements. It also makes it easier for maintenance staff to have the attic stock of extra materials to share across buildings. The underlying goal of creating an environment of inspiring spaces for learning. So all of these materials are trying to bring light and color and frankly fun into the space. Like I was mentioned before, considering maintenance, longevity, sustainability, and cost when we're going ahead and selecting these materials. So they're easy to clean, they give you a long lifespan so you don't have to worry about them as much. And in cases like the carpets, they're tiles, so they're easily replaceable when they're stained, etc. And then one of the mandates was to maintain flexibility throughout. So again, the furniture layouts really allows for that flexibility, especially when we have more furniture than permanent casework.
Keep going, Travis.
All right. So here we have one of the typical classroom layouts. And you can see this is one of the bay windows with a wood surround, with LVT flooring, luxury vinyl flooring, sustainable products, durable, long-lasting, initial furniture layouts, built-in casework here and storage, and a sink. It's another view. that's showing the teaching wall, and we're having discussions with the principals. We're having a follow-up discussion with staff, I believe, on the 10th of January, when we'll review this one more time with both the principals, Dr. Adley, who wasn't available the other day, and the individual librarians, music teachers, and art teachers. Okay, this is one of the music rooms. Again, the focus is on kind of an open plan layout, so they can get larger groups in there, arrange seating, and then push all the storage off the perimeter, and a lot of natural light. This is an acoustic, that's the acoustic wood look metal ceiling, and it's pitched upwards, so you give a nice volume of space in there. And this is one of the typical art rooms where we start to incorporate wall covering, easily cleanable. They can pin material up to them. And we have our built-in storage along the perimeter, some built-in storage along the windows. But again, you're getting a lot of natural light from the tall windows coming into the art rooms. And then for the Learning Commons, we kind of did 3 different layouts, 3 different color palettes, I should say, so the principals and the decision makers had options that we can pick and choose from if we wanted them to be different amongst the different libraries, or pull elements together and then incorporate those kind of throughout. And so again, you have your acoustic metal wood look ceiling, you have carpeting, carpet tiles on the floor, easily replaceable, a lot of movable storage bins. We're accommodating the volumes of books per conversations with the librarians. We have our reception desk here and some built-in storage along the wall with separate zones that were, again, dictated when we met with the librarians, whether there's small breakout zones, small group instructional zones, reading nooks, and green rooms for filming and recording. Here we have homes where we have the new bump out over here overlooking the courtyard, and these also have separate little program nooks for story time and browsing. And again, the room is also separated into different age groups for where the books are located. This is showing some wood trim along the wall, and a feature wall where we have an opportunity to show a large graphic. You'll note here that we do incorporate kind of a red look, because red is a color that Holmes uses a lot, but it was a universal opinion that blue was the preferred color palette. And actually Royal was the one that everyone came to agreement that this was kind of the pattern they liked most. And here you see this is a separate breakout room over here where you have these acoustic kind of separation panels, so you can slide these into space and then have your own separate area apart from the rest of the library, and then open it up when you need larger groups. Over here would be the maker corner of the makerspace corner of the room. On this bottom image here, you have the bump out into the courtyard with all the glazing bringing in the natural light, and you have separate reading nooks there. And this is the new front entrance into the library. These panels are acoustic panels you see on the wall, and then they blend into the acoustic ceiling. That's a brief overview on the interior design, but we are refining those when we meet with the staff in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Travis.
Mm-hmm.
So as folks see, there's the next item on the slide is just upcoming schedule. Folks can note this. The key things are assuming that this board approves moving forward and presenting to the Board of Ed is a presentation to the Board of Ed for design development. Basically this presentation, and then P&Z meeting for Hindley and Royal on the 10th, P&Z for Holmes on the 24th of January, ARB on the 17th, and then obviously some internal meetings relating to construction phasing and meeting again with the principals and the school board. So that is, again, it's a very compressed time frame with a lot to get done. Was there anything more in terms of the design presentation before we go to discussion and public comment?
No, that
This
was
is
it.
Jill.
That's all we have.
We'll just
Jill?
have to figure out. Yeah, I think Alan put forward potentially meeting on the 10th with the Board of Ed, but it's P&Z that night. So we just need to see whether or not that's possible. If not, I think our next regular meeting is the 24th. Is that right, Alan?
For thereafter in the board meeting?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Why is the week of the 3rd too close? Is that not doable for Board of Ed?
We don't
No,
have a regular meeting.
Oh, okay.
There is no meeting on the 3rd, and it's just devoted to the budget, the presentation of the budget. So really, it would be the 10th, although it conflicts with the P&Z if that's the case, and then the 24th.
Well, we might be able to do both the same evening. We would just have to be coordinate with P&Z. Maybe they can put us on late, and that we could be first on the agenda on the Board of Ed meeting type of thing. If there's a 7 o'clock meeting, I don't remember what time your meeting starts, 7 or 7:30. If we were first on the agenda there, then we could run down the street and be one of the later ones, because the planning and zoning meetings tend to go on for a while.
Well, that's where I have you at the moment. Exactly what you said for the 10th.
Okay, we'll look into that, and we'll assume it's the 10th and try to coordinate it, but we'll get back to you.
I mean, I guess conceivably we could have 2 different teams, right? We can divide and conquer, worst case.
Absolutely. Travis could do the Board of Ed meeting, and I could do the planning and zoning meetings.
I mean, we know Jill will already be at Board of Ed, and we can come up with committee members, including myself, to do P&Z if we have to. So that's an option if we need to do it.
Yeah, good idea.
And once we know when the Board of Ed meeting will be, we'll work with KG&D on getting the DDR meeting with OSCG&R set up, because that it does require that the Board of Ed has heard and has accepted the documents before we go to them. So.
I don't think you want to push it out much later. So we'll confirm that the 10th, but I would say it probably is going to be the 10th. But okay, we'll move forward.
All right, we'll figure that out. Okay. Then I think the next step is to open up for public comment on the design development presentation. Standard rules apply, which is that we keep it to 2 minutes per presentation. Obviously, I want to be respectful of people's time. I want to give an appropriate amount of time, but I recognize that this meeting's already gone for an hour and 45 minutes on a school night. So if folks want to be recognized to speak, now's your chance. Corey VC.
Yes, hi, 13 Lake Drive in Darien. Hi, everyone. Thank you for spending time on the stormwater issues. I have some questions regarding, I heard Eric throw out the possibility of some runoff management to Hoyt Street, similar to the Henley plan of running off to Route 1. Was this considered for homeschool? And if not, if it was considered and not selected, why? What was the thought there? And also, I think even more importantly, does the new plan go further to manage stormwater runoff? We heard a quote of 40% improvement of peak flow for Henley, but I heard no such stats for homes. I'd like to understand how we're improving with numbers the drainage the stormwater runoff at Holmes. Regarding parking, I think we heard from a lot of people, including third-party reviewers, that the number of parking spots, 95 from EdSpecs, is not based on reality. I would hope that the committee has enough defense now to strongly consider one of the ideas that Eric mentioned, which is to put off the expansion of parking in the north end until it actually matches real parking needs. That's my hope. I continue to be concerned with pedestrian traffic across the access road, especially for deliveries, which often occur at the same time as school starting. And my questions about how the size of that access road haven't really been answered at any point. And lastly, just a question about the construction phasing plans. Are those going to be posted online at some point? That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Joe and Eric, can you guys, I think the answer on Hoyt was that per Public Works, that wasn't practical because that's a state road. Where Nearwater Lane at Hindley is a town road, and we have more flexibility to do that as an internal, as a town matter. Hoyt is a state road that we don't have the discretion to do that without getting the state involved. But I want to get any further input on that from Joe or Eric.
Chris, that's absolutely correct. We did when we had our meeting with DPW. That was an option we had discussed, was taking some of the drainage from the home site out to Hoyt Street, like we in a similar fashion to what we're doing at Hindley. The principal difference is that roughly a little bit less, I would say, a third to one half of the Hindley site already drains to Nearwater, whereas on Holmes, as you saw in my presentation, the parking lot all under existing conditions drains to the northwest. At Holmes, about maybe 10% of that site drains back towards Hoyt Street, and Hoyt Street is a state highway. So the state would not allow us to discharge additional area into their drainage system. That's the we did look at that. We explored that, but in our discussion with DPW, it was determined that it just wasn't feasible to direct any additional runoff into the Hoyt Street system.
Joe, just to be clear, switching gears, the standard that the town asks for, right, is a 50-year storm. In each of the 3 campuses, we are accommodating a 100-year storm, which is both over the town standard and significantly more than anything that is in place right now at Holmes or in any of the other 3 campuses. Correct?
Jill, that's correct. The town standard for drainage design, when you're looking at comparative hydrology, is a 50-year storm, which is approximately 7.5 to 8 inches in a 24-hour period. What these systems are designed for, we've designed them up to a 100-year storm, which is about 9 to 9.5 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. So we are already exceeding the town's design standards for drainage. The other piece of that, we're reducing the peak volume and flow from the site under existing conditions for all storms. From we looked at the 2 all the way up to the 100, and the percentage reduction basis is about 20%. It varies by storm, but on average is about a 20% reduction, which is still a significant reduction.
Joe, wasn't there a comment that Ed Gentile had mentioned about that he really wants to continue to make sure that water is flowing in a similar manner than it is that today and in the future, because those wetlands need to be maintained, and even the lake that's down there needs to, receives water from the system upstream, and part of that water is coming from our campus, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. The DPW director did express that. It was expressed at both at Hindley and at Holmes to make sure that we're not significantly changing the drainage patterns at either location. Um, by what we're trying to do is recharge groundwater through the infiltration systems, which is standard stormwater management practice. It's required by the town regulations. We're exceeding what's required by the town regulations. And we also have the input from the peer reviewer, which we've also incorporated into the revised design.
And Joe, it seemed like neighbors' concerns were flooding, and the system that's being developed here is addressing that sort of initial flooding potential by containing more water on campus. So I think you just want to clarify that.
Right, exactly. What we're required to do as part of the town's stormwater management regulations under Section 880 of the regulations is to demonstrate that we're not increasing peak flow and volume from the site, which our calculations show. And the way we're doing that is through that proposed retention system, which both holds the water back and also forces it into the ground. So we do get some volume loss there. But we're not completely cutting off flow to the wetlands, which is also important. So it's a balancing act.
Thank you. Any other comment from the public? Okay. Thank you, Corey, for your input.
Chris, can you hear me?
Yeah, go. Yeah, I can. We can now.
This is Paul Kunz from 31 Phillips Lane. I wasn't quite sure about the schematic about it looked like a trench drain to me across the field. Where does that go? Where's the water from that drain? Does that drain go into the dry wells, or does that drain go somewhere else?
To answer your question, the proposed curtain drain along the western edge of that soccer field will discharge into the catch basin that's there now. But as a reminder, that catch basin does get replaced with a new structure. And then from there, it drains back east. You'll see it there to an existing manhole in the center of the home site. And then it discharges into the north. So we're maintaining the same drainage pattern.
Okay, so only the new parking lot and the new building go into the dry wells.
Right, that's correct. Only the building additions and the existing parking lot go into the northern stormwater chamber system there that you see in yellow.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Ruby Huang from 12 Lake Drive. I just wanted to express my support of the comments of the VC family from 13 Lake Drive. Same question, same comments. I just want to make sure that, it was voiced that I support those same questions about whether or not we needed to proceed with the parking at this point. I don't think it's justified, and just trying to understand those other questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? Okay. Then with that, what we need to do is, as a committee, is, as we said at the very, very beginning of this long meeting, is to take action to authorize the design team to proceed with the construction drawings, and that we are satisfied with the design development drawings as presented to us this evening for purposes of presenting those to the Board of Education. So if I could get a motion to approve authorizing the design.
But
I'm sorry,
I
go
just
ahead,
want to
Sarah.
make sure, I would like to get this motion correct. That was kind of long. You're saying
Sorry.
a motion to authorize the design team to move ahead with construction drawings.
To move ahead with construction drawings based off of the design development drawings, and to present the design development drawings as they were presented to us this evening to the Board of Education at the next Board of Education meeting.
Thank you. Do we need to do by school? I don't think so. Jill?
We do.
We do? Okay. Then let's
Okay,
start with the motion for Henley.
Sure. Can we get a motion to authorize the design team to proceed with construction drawings for the Hindley School addition and renovation project based on the design development drawings as presented to the committee this evening, and to present those design development drawings to the Board of Education? Motion, Dave Martin moves.
Aye.
Sarah, can you second? I can't see you up there. Or Sarah seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Jameson, aye. Unanimous.
Aye. Yep.
Could we get a motion with regard to the Holmes School to authorize the design team to proceed with the construction drawings based on the design development drawings presented to us this evening, and to present those design development drawings to the Board of Education at the next Board of Education meeting? Dave Martin moves. Sarah seconds.
Jameson.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Aye. Unanimous. Could we get a motion with respect to the Royal School to authorize the design team to proceed with construction drawings based on the design development drawings as presented to the committee this evening, and to present those design development drawings to the Board of Education at the next Board of Education meeting? Dave Martin moves. Sarah seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Unanimous. Great. So those three motions passed unanimously. Again, appreciate everybody hanging in there for a long meeting. Really appreciate all the work that the design team put into this presentation. This was really, really informative. Appreciate the public attending our meeting and their thoughtful comments. Really the next things are getting everything ready for our next P&Z and Board of Education meetings. And before we adjourn, we'd just like to wish everybody a very, very happy holiday, however you're celebrating. And we will see everybody in the new year. With that,
Chris,
can we get a motion to, I'm
wait,
sorry, go ahead,
Chris,
Sarah.
really quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the committee members, we are going to be calendaring meetings for the new year soon. If you could please send me the dates in the new year that work for you best, and Travis and Eric and Dave, and please include your information. Obviously, we need you kind of going forward. So would love to know your availability, guys, as far out as you can give me. Thank you.
Well, can we presume this Wednesday, every other Wednesday time slot?
Would love that.
Unless
but I want to
people,
make sure it works for everyone.
why don't we presume that unless people get back to you with why that doesn't work and what
makes sense. Yeah, I can do that.
Starting with, I guess we really need to pick the first Wednesday, right? And then go with everyone after that, right? So
do we want to meet after the Board of Ed, so then the 11th then? Or do you want to do
why don't we start on the 11th? Plan to start on the 11th unless people object.
Okay.
And then go every other Wednesday after that at
Perfect.
6 p.m.
I'll set that up. Thank you, guys. Sorry. All right, now we can move to adjourn.
Can I get a motion to adjourn? Dave Martin moves. Sarah seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great holiday.